Morning, Larry. Let's see. Good morning.
I'm trying to get you unmuted. Did I?
Yeah, I'm unmuted.
Oh, try and get the video going.
Okay. So far, we have Daddy-O. You know that guy?
That's an old name.
Ah.
John here.
Okay, here we are.
Hey, John. How you doing?
Oh, we're hanging in there.
Okay. Happy Friday, everybody.
That's right.
Nice haircut, John.
Say what?
Nice haircut.
Oh, thanks.
You see this mop on me, don't you?
Yeah, I finally broke down and went after what, 2 months to get one.
Okay. Morning, Eloise. How you doing?
Great. How are you? How is everybody?
Well, I'm good. I think
We're
everybody's
here.
doing all right.
All right.
All right. So it's Friday. And guess what we're doing? We're talking about drawings and drawing in general. And I've got some things I want to show you guys. And I also have some good news that I want to share with you, which is I just got a phone call from Sabrina this morning, and she informed me that the county commissioners approved our 2020 budget, and included in that, and actually starting right now, they've set aside money so that the different senior centers can buy what they call a premium Zoom account, which means,
Good.
yeah, that if I can get these classes switched over into that premium Zoom account, then they can stretch on for about an hour to hour and a half. Okay.
Yay! That's terrific.
Yeah, give us some more time to get a little more in depth into things, and so yeah, I think that's a good move. And
Yes.
And they've
Right.
also authorized money for more. Well, for each of the centers to go out and buy a external hard drive, so that I can download a lot of these meetings and the videos and things I'm making and save them at the center. So they're not taking up my hard drive space, which is good, because my computer was getting to the point last week where it was almost full. So I had to break down and spend about $200 to go out and buy an external hard drive so I can start getting stuff off of it so it would just function. But that's good. So the county's moving forward with trying to make some changes, and getting people the equipment that they need so that we can continue as long as we need to do this. Okay.
Very good.
All right. So anyway, I'm going to start, and I want to talk about the drawings that you guys sent in. But I also wanted to go through, and I wanted to share some of the things that I've looked at off of the internet. And if you just Google contemporary drawings, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of examples of some really stunning drawings out there. So I'm going to share some of these with you. And while I'm showing them to you, I want to talk a little bit about drawing, in itself as an art form. Okay, and it can be, and it can be an amazing art form just in itself. So you don't have to paint and things like that. Let's see, for those of you who don't want to. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
The poor lady.
How shocking.
She's tied up in knots.
Wow.
She is tied up in knots. Right? and that's a perfect reaction into what I want to talk about. Okay? Because drawing can have Okay, am I gonna have to unmute or unmute everybody? Drawings can have a lot of impact, in the way that people, react. And they can be very, very powerful tools to communicate ideas. So drawing isn't really just an exercise into necessarily exploring what an object is and the form and the dimension of it. It can also be used in, many different ways to, create a reaction, an emotion in people. And, in looking at this drawing, it's relatively shocking, isn't it? Okay.
Is that a drawing or a photograph?
It's a drawing.
Wow.
I know. Yeah, it's amazing. And I don't have any idea how large this actually was. I'm guessing it was a fairly large drawing, okay, in size. But I'm going to show you some more that I think would be equally, maybe not shocking, but certainly, impactful. This, for example, okay? I mean, you look at that and, your question, Rebecca, was, well, could this be, a photograph? I mean, it looks very almost, photographic, and when you begin to look at it, my guess is that this was not that large and it's treated a little more graphically, but, beautifully handled.
Wow.
And to be working with something like graphite or charcoal and being able to manage the range of value and create the illusion of form and texture on the skin and with the water, that was quite something.
I'll say.
Yeah, beautifully done. Here's another example. Again, I'm guessing it's probably a charcoal drawing. Could be Conte, but it could also be charcoal. But again, a very powerful statement, just in itself, with use of value, texture. And notice, how the different parts of the drawing look very different from each other. If you look at the background and the treatment of the background, it's very different than the treatment of the skin or the hair. And so it separates out, very nicely, as far as, which area belongs to what. So this artist, was very intent, in not only creating the change in value, form, light, and shadow, but also the texture of the surface that they were creating to, again, separate out those different elements from one another. Okay. Here's a little more traditional treatment. And, when you look at this, it's very painterly, isn't it? And in fact, when you look at it very closely, you can begin to see where there were areas where it actually dripped and kind of ran. And so this particular technique was probably done with charcoal. And they used a medium, and you can use like a paint thinner, like a terpenoid or whatever to dissolve charcoal. But in this case, it was probably, a medium called acetone. And they laid in their big blocks of dark, and then they went over the page with acetone, just sort of moving the charcoal and creating kind of this drip effect. And after that dried, they went back in and lifted out and then worked back into other areas to begin to detail it. But again, this artist was very intentional about how they used those textures, You know,
Charles, would you point out exactly where it's dripping? Is it in the background mostly?
yeah, back here in the background.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you could see it almost looks like you can see the brush strokes, you know,
Yeah.
where, you know, they picked up
Yeah.
some of the medium and it was wet and they just kind of, you know, went all
Right.
over the page to kind of create a base tone. And they probably did that, you know, pretty freely all over the page. Again, letting that dry, and then they went back in and worked the drawing over it, lifting out, say, the area for the head, the hair, you know, things like that. And the nice thing about using acetone, and I don't recommend that you run out and go get acetone or anything like that, unless you have a really well ventilated space, it's really not safe to work with. And I did a demo once at Benson with acetone, and it's a great medium to work in. And unlike the thinner, like terpenoid, which terpenoid will keep the page wet for a long time. It's very slow drying. The acetone, literally within 3 to 5 minutes, has just evaporated away, and the page is completely dry. And that's why it's really effective as a medium for drawing. Yeah.
Isn't acetone the chemical they use in dry cleaning clothes?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, they will. Yeah, for cleaning out spots and things like that. But it has other industrial uses. And actually, a lot of screen printers who do silk screen and, well, actually even you know, people working with metal plates and stone plates will use acetone to clean, you know, the plate, you know, and get all of the ink and everything out of the plate.
Isn't it a nail polish remover?
Yeah, you can. Well, you can use it for a lot of things. You can, you know, remove nail polish. You can take almost anything off with acetone. It's a really, really powerful solvent. Like I said, the advantage of using acetone with charcoal in a drawing, or even with graphite for that matter of fact, is that you can wet the page with it, and literally about 3 to 5 minutes later, it's totally evaporated, and the page is totally dry. So you can go back in and work, you know, unlike using, say, like a paint thinner, a turpentine, or a terpenoid, which once it's in the page, it's got an oily type of base, and you know the oil stays in the paper with any of those solvents. Okay. Acetone, it's more like an alcohol, and it evaporates, you know, really, really quickly. And you know, just as another medium, you might try, you know, to, you know, put a wash over your charcoal or graphite. You might try alcohol, you know, just regular isopropyl alcohol. You can get some pretty good effects with that as well. So, let's see. I'm going to show you a few more, and then we're going to get into talking about some of the drawings you guys have. Again, this is one of those, it's that wet sort of technique where they lay down either graphite or charcoal and then work into it with acetone or alcohol. And, you know, it gives this kind of washy look, you know, to some of those areas. And then they've gone back in and they've worked, you know, back over those areas by lifting out, you know, to the light, or, you know, adding in, building up value. You know, like in the face, they probably totally lifted that area out before they went back in and started putting, you know, building in any of that detail. Same thing with the hands and the arms. So you can get, you know, some really beautiful effects.
Wow.
Right. And obviously, I'm showing you guys a lot of figures, okay? But you know, this was, I thought, you know, particularly striking, kind of powerful. See, there's really no detail in the face. There's this illusion, you know, that there are eyes and things there, but it's really just, you know, they're using the shapes of the value in the eye sockets and changing the value from the deep areas of the eye sockets into that transition, the bridge of the nose, to tell you that there's a change in form there. And so there's a suggestion that there's really a face there, but you know, they didn't really take a lot of time to go back in and put in details like lips and, you know, eyes and things like that. And the same is true pretty much so with the hands. You know, there's a slight change, you know, in value. But again, you know, they didn't sit down and draw and render, you know, individual fingers and things like that. Now this is probably a combination, again, where they worked wet. You know, they put down and did an initial drawing, went over it, wet it, let it kind of drip and run a little bit. And then they went in, lifted out, you know, restated maybe their line work, started building up some of the tones, and then went back in with either some white pastel or chalk, you know, to heighten some of the light areas and to build a range of value in.
The upper arm there and shoulder gives really the sense of form, like you were talking in one of the other sessions.
Yeah, I mean, you can begin to see how, you know, just across this arm and into the back, how those planes sort of change. And it's real subtle. It's just little changes in value. It's very slight, but it's pretty successful at creating the illusion of, you know, that arm being round and that shoulder coming out a little bit. Since we're talking about anatomical stuff there, blow that up. Again, you know, it's just those changes in value. And, you know, this person is probably done in Conte, would be my guess. And again, you know, look at the, and again, you know, it's laid in a layer of tone, went over it probably with something wet like acetone, alcohol, something like that. And then they went in and lifted out, you know, the light areas and then built a range of value around the forms and then heightened it again with probably, you know, either white chalk or pastel. No. But they've got, you know, a real strong sense of form, you know, on these figures. So, and then this will be the last one I'll show you. And again, you know, look at how that sets up a mood, you know. You know, it has this nice feeling to it. And see, the background is not laid in evenly. You know, it's almost very abstract, but they've definitely given you a sense of where the light is coming from and, you know, falling off into shadow. And the actual figure that they've rendered, you know, follows that idea, so that the light is really showing on the front plane of the face. As you move to the side, it falls into shadow, you know, and it does that all throughout the figure. Also notice where they really put most, you know, the majority of the work in this drawing is really right here on the front plane of the face, and, you know, maybe a bit in the fabric, you know, the detail of the flower here, some of the folds up in the scarf on her head. And, you know, it's a really, you know, beautifully
Wow.
rendered drawing, and really nice control of value. Okay. So Eloise, remember those apples?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, same thing. If you look at this head as an apple, same thing's going on. We starting off here at the light, you know, moving around, you know, into the shadow, and you find that core shadow running right through here. And then everything from that core shadow moving this direction begins to get some change in value. It's still dark, right? But it's not as dark as that core shadow. Okay. Until it, you know, begins turning that form, and then you even get some reflected light in here. So all of those elements that we talked about in turning form are, you know, in this drawing. You know, you can see it pretty clearly on the scarf as well, you know, how those transition. And if you really look at where it's lightest and brightest, it's really kind of like right in here at the cheekbone, right here where the light begins to meet the shadow. And where those two come together, that's where you get that contrast. And that contrast makes everything pull forward, right? Notice too that, you know, they didn't put any hard outline around the edge of the face. See, the value of that, you know, falls into the background and is pretty subdued. So it's not like a hard, clear, drawn edge right there. And it's really effective at letting that form turn. You know, if you went back in, we had okay, let me show you this drawing again. Like this drawing, okay. See where they've used that outline, the effect is, you know, you clearly see where the suggestion of the body is, but it flattens the shape there, right? And they deliberately chose to flatten the shape, you know, across most of this and make it kind of graphic. And then in the areas of the hands, and particularly in the area of the face, you see they lost that outline. They deliberately got rid of it so that they could give you the illusion to turn form, particularly in this area, which makes it really the focal point of the drawing. And so you see, you can be selective about how you use line and tone really to direct somebody's eye to look at a particular part of the drawing, or making that, you know, the focal point of the drawing. And that's really the same thing that we talk about in painting or anything else. You know, trying to be, you know, selective about, you know, what you're choosing, you know, to emphasize. Okay. Okay, let's stop sharing. Okay.
And you lift,
Pardon?
excuse me, you mentioned lifting out using acetone or.
Well, now what you're doing is you're not lifting out with the acetone. What you're doing is you're putting that down, and you're just laying in the tone and softening it so it doesn't look real streaky. You know, where, you know, if you're using a charcoal pencil and you're laying it on like this, you know, you're gonna have a lot of lines, right? So you take a big brush and some acetone and wash over it, all of a sudden it becomes this very organic looking thing, and it softens it. Okay, so there's not all these directional lines.
Can you do that with graphite or just with charcoal?
No, you should be able to do it with graphite as well. Yeah, almost any kind of dry drawing medium. I've never tried it with pastel. You know, it might actually work with pastel as well. Particularly like the hard pastel, you know, like the ones that you can get, you know, at Michael's and places like that, that are not terribly expensive and are a little bit hard. Those probably work pretty well to, you know, to work with acetone, alcohol, or something like that, because they are a little bit harder. All right, so I'm gonna pull up some of the drawings that you guys did, and we're gonna talk about those. Right. Let's see, get rid of that. Okay. There we go. All right, some of you guys may have seen this from last week. And then what I was talking about is while you're doing your drawings, you want to really think about, you know, 3 basic things you really have to consider. Okay. One is creating a form. Okay. And in Eloise's case or Betty's case, you know, whether you're doing an apple or you're doing a hat or whether you're doing a piece of furniture or whatever you're drawing, the first thing you have to really kind of consider is what's the form? You know, what are the shapes? And not, you know, is it a square? Is it a circle? But, you know, more of a 3-dimensional thing. Is it a cube? Is it a sphere? Is it an egg shape? And what am I going to do, you know, to create the illusion that there is an underlying form there, you know? And so basically, if you look at this, and if you could turn her head into like a styrofoam mannequin or something, you know, and take away all the features, you might get something like this, where the light is hitting the upper part of that form and it's falling off into, you know, shadow and reflected light, right? So that's, you know, form. And then of course, because in this case, I'm drawing a human head, it's not this perfectly smooth surface. So the next thing you have to think about, where are the planes? You know, how do I divide the front planes of the face versus the side plane versus the top? And if I can see underneath the bottom, right? And where do those planes begin and where do they end? Because that's going to affect the light and how light reacts on that shape or that form. Because where those planes change and they change angles, they're either going to be turning more toward light or away from it. If they're turning away, they're falling into shadow. If they're turning toward it, then they're getting lighter and brighter. They're on the light side of the form. Okay. And then you combine it, you know, the two together with, you know, value and trying to find those separations in value and what's the local value for that object. You know, is this person, you know, got a darker skin tone, which is going to have a different range of values than somebody who's very fair, right? And so you've got to find the correct range of value for that object that you're drawing. And again, you know, whether it's an apple, whether it's a hat, whether it's, you know, anything else, it's going to have its own unique range of values. And you as an artist have to make a good observation about what's the lightest light that I see and what's the darkest area that I see. And it's going to work within that range. And again, it's that idea of local value. Okay. So this was a drawing that Betty Bates did. And it's a hat. And she's done some more work on it. And Betty, you want to tell us a little more about it?
Well, the main thing I was working on is trying to get the values in. So after I went back in after this photo, I tried to put some more dark values in. It was very challenging. A lot of texture in it.
Now this is in graphite?
Yes.
Okay. And what kind of pencil were you using? Do you remember?
I was using a range mostly from about 2B to 8B.
Okay. All right. So they were fairly soft.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. You know, my comment would be, looking at this, you know, you're getting some nice strong darks in here. You could probably still push the dark, you know, under the rim of the hat here a little bit more. But the main thing is, and I know you're trying to bring out the texture of the hat. And was this like a straw hat?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's the impression that I got. You know, you might also use that kneaded eraser and don't rub, but just clean the eraser, and on the light side, just very gently, you know, try to lift out some of that tone, you know, to bring out some of the light areas to contrast the shadow areas, right?
Okay.
But yeah, nice. Let's get down here. Let's see. There's Wanda's apples. So here is Eloise here. I don't know.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay. So yeah, you sent me this one. This was your 1940 Ford Coupe. Okay. Tell us a little bit about this guy.
Well, I've never really drawn a car before, and it's the color is red. I could not find all of my pencils, and I'd like to know how you make it look like it's shining in spots, because wherever the light's coming from, it casts a glow, not a shine on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're going to have highlights.
Yes.
So much like watercolor, you know, in drawing, you know, anytime that you put a tone down on the page, unless you have something like an electric eraser or something that's really good at lifting all that tone out, you know, you're going to have a hard time getting back to getting the paper to look as white as it originally looked. So you could either take the approach much like a watercolor artist, where you're saving those lights. You know, you figure out where your highlights are first, you know, and you basically save those and build up the value softly into those lights, and then really push your darks. And again, you know, structurally, I mean, you see the car, but what it could really use is it could use more contrast, right? It could use much stronger darks, you know, maybe some much stronger lights on it somewhere. And that would help it look more dimensional, you know, than it is right now. Okay. And again, you know, it may be a function of the pencils that you have. Do you have like some really soft drawing pencils, like a 60, 90, something like that you know of?
Like up to 9B, I think, and they have V's and H's on the end of the
Yeah.
numbers.
Right. Now H means, yeah, H means hard. And the last thing I would try to do, if I were a draftsman or an architect, I'd be using an H series of pencils. But for actually creating like a rendering or a drawing, I want to use those B series of pencils because they're much softer, okay?
All right, use B.
Yeah. And you'll find that you can get those darks much darker. Now, on the light side, if you want to use those H pencils, again, you know, because they're harder, they're not going to leave as much graphite. So you're going to build up that tone more slowly. You could do that and use that fuller range all the way from your H all the way through your Bs. And you'll find you'll get a lot more contrast in your drawings. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. So don't just work with one pencil unless you're really good, you know, at controlling the pressure, and you're very patient about building up that range of value. And in that case, you know, go ahead and work with a 6B or a 9B. Just use that. You know, some people can do that. Other people really need those wider range of pencils because they have a hard time controlling the pressure on that. Okay.
Question.
Moving on very quickly because we are down to about 6 minutes.
Oh, sorry.
Before we go on, Charles, are we going to be here Monday?
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to show.
It's Memorial Day.
I know. But yeah, I scheduled the class, so I will be here Monday morning and Monday afternoon. Okay.
Okay.
I mean, after all, we're all locked inside. What can we do?
That's right.
So we might as well.
We'll have a virtual cookout.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. We'll all get together and have a Memorial Day party.
Right.
Okay.
That's funny.
So here's June's drawing. And again, June did an apple and a spoon. And she did a really nice job, and she's doing, you know, a lot of things that are really working pretty well here. If you look at how she's following the form, you know, of the apple as she's laying in that tone, that's really beginning to work really nicely for her. Okay, right in there. About the only comment that I would have is kind of, in Eloise, you and I have talked about this many times, is when you squint your eye down, back here on the shadow side, you know, like that light right in there. I know that's a reflected light, but it's getting a little too light. You know,
Okay,
it's as light as
like
over here.
that.
Yeah, and they have to be very separate. And so if you take your pencil and just very lightly, you know, from like this point where your foreshadow is over, just lay in, you know, like a layer of tone on top of it, and push that back so it's not as light as that. Then all of a sudden it'll begin to turn for you, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's just that little bit there. And obviously, you know, my general comment to you is, you know, you still need to push your darks a little bit more.
Okay.
Again, you know, the darker you can get, and you're getting close, like right in here, right in there, you know, you're getting some good strong darks in there finally, and that's helping, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in this drawing, kind of the same thing, you know? Yeah, just watch your value, okay? And
It's hard for me to watch
know.
my value.
it's hard for everybody, but you have to just take time, okay? I want to get on to Larry's drawing, because we're down to 3 minutes. Larry went back in and he worked on this some more. And again, you know, he's beginning to get some really nice movement, some nice form,
People from the class.
you know, in these drawings. And Larry, it's good. You're pushing your values a little bit better. So this looks a lot more solid and strong than, you know, when we first showed it to you.
Be careful.
Here's another example, and this is Larry's as well. And you know, again, you know, it's a nice, you know, nice shape, nice forms. Again, pushing those values, and he and I talked about it earlier this week. But, and I know this is a very light object, but you know, just differentiating here and pushing the value right along the foreshadow line here, again, would begin to turn that and give it a little more shape and form than he's got right now. So, okay. And I wanted to show you this, because we have less than a minute. This is a ballpoint pen drawing that I did. And I did this, was it last? No, yeah, it was like not this week, it was the week before. And I had attended my first virtual figure drawing class with the Atlanta Artist Center on Thursday morning at 10. And again, if you look up the Atlanta Artist Center and you're interested in figure drawing, they always have a model. And it's about 40 minutes is all they'll do. And they take one pose. And you can do what you want, you know, as far as, you know, drawing, painting. I would just suggest drawing because of the time frame. But again, you know, it gives you a chance to work with a subject you normally wouldn't work with. And the only cost for it is they're not taking a fee. This was the actual model. I took a screenshot of it. The only fee is you pay the model, you know, and it's basically a donation. So, you know, I usually donate like $5, you know, to sit and draw. You know, if you go there, I think the fee is usually about $10, but you know, if they're working, you know, from home and stuff, about a $5 donation, plus the center pays them as well. You know, so that's money on top of what they're already getting paid to be there. It helps support them, keeps them working, and it gives you an opportunity to draw.